After owning the Ricoh GR3 for about 6 months, these are the camera settings that I wish I knew when I first bought this camera. Starting with the camera settings, we'll go and click the menu button, which brings us into the full camera menu. When in the menu setting, make sure that the camera icon on the top left is highlighted, because if it's not, you might be changing the camera settings for the video aspect of this camera, not necessarily the photo. So make sure that the photo camera and not the video camera is highlighted. And then from the top, I use auto area autofocus center, and this just helps mainly gravitate the autofocus capturing towards the center of the frame. And for my use case, whether I'm just taking photos of friends that I'm around, or also, you know, just like the surrounding and street photography, it's great because majority of the time my subject is in the center or like third of the frame, so the autofocus is able to snap quickly. And then along with that, like I just mentioned, since I'm taking photos of a lot of people or like my friends, I keep on the face and eye detection, so make sure that that one is on. And then scrolling down a bit more, the exposure settings that I use is AV, or that stands for aperture priority, and we'll go into why I use aperture priority over manual focus a little later on in the video, but until then we'll just stick with aperture priority. And then the ISO settings I keep on auto as well, and then if you click right on the D-pad, it'll bring us into the ISO settings. And then I set the upper limit of the ISO at 12,800, and I do this because at 12,800, I feel like the grain doesn't mess up the image quality too much, but I feel like a little bit past this and the image starts kind of falling apart. So I try to keep it at the max of 12,800, and then the lower limit being 100. And then my minimum shutter speed, this one is important, I keep it at 1/125th. And I do this because I want all my photos to be sharp and crisp. There are certain times and scenarios where, you know, you may want a little bit of motion blur, and then you could change the shutter speed yourself to like maybe 1/30th or 1/60th. But for 99% of my shooting, I just want a crisp, sharp image. So I keep it at 1/25th, and I pretty much use this camera just to replace my iPhone camera, and give it just like similar but more stylistic outcome without needing to like edit the photos or whatnot. As for white balance, I keep it at auto white balance, and before I actually would use a specific temperature, like maybe 5,000 Kelvin or something on like the warmer side. But then I realized that sometimes when shooting indoors and it wasn't super sunny, the photo would just look super orange and super baked. So that's why I ultimately changed it to auto white balance. And then if we click right on the D-pad, it brings us into the white balance settings. And then you click FN while hovering over the auto white balance setting. I moved over the cursor to G2A11, which helps the highlights or the white balance be a little bit more warm and orange tone, similar to that, like, you know, high Kelvin specific temperature, but also helps keep it in a general range that isn't too orange in certain settings. So that's why I chose to go with auto white balance with orange tint rather than a specific Kelvin temperature. Continuing on down, the color space that I use is sRGB, and then the image control I keep custom at 1, and I use negative film, which is similar to like classic chrome on Fuji, and then I use +2 on saturation, 0 on hue, 0 high-low key adjustment, +3 on contrast, -4 on contrast highlights, and then -1 on contrast shadows, +1 on sharpness, 0 shading, and 0 clarity. And essentially these are like exactly like Reggie's Portrait that you can find on like Reggie Baloncesto's YouTube, which I'll link down below as well. So essentially I just use Reggie's Portrait on my settings 100% of the time, and I haven't had to change it ever since I've uploaded it. I think the only difference, it may be the white balance, but it's been so long that I honestly forget. Like I mentioned previously, in the camera settings, part of the video, I actually don't use this camera in manual mode. And although that may freak some of y'all out, because as us camera nerds, you know, we want full control of the camera and we want to be able to, you know, change the shutter speed, the ISO, the aperture in every single photo. For me personally, using this camera as a point and shoot and just having the ability to just pull it out of my pocket and snap what's right in front of my face at the moment and get a sharp photo, Aperture Priority has been able to help me every single photo that I've taken. And essentially what Aperture Priority does is it allows you to choose the f-stop or aperture that you want to shoot at, and then the camera figures out the ISO and the shutter speed for you. So for myself, since I just want sharp photos, that's why I keep my minimum shutter speed at 1/125th, so that I know that the lowest shutter speed that it'll be at is 1/125, and it'll catch any motion that's in the frame. Another thing about Aperture Priority and this camera that I really like is on the top right hand side by the LED screen, they have an exposure adjustment dial. And let's say there's a time where you want to take a silhouette photo and the camera isn't able to meter your photo properly, you're able to, you know, either turn the dial left to turn the exposure down, so you're able to help preserve the highlights in the photos, or if you want to preserve the shadows and, you know, get more of your subject and blow out the highlights, you're able to adjust it right and turn up the adjustment. So without even needing to worry about any of the settings, you're able to just fix the exposure of your photo within a couple of seconds. Finally, another thing that I learned when shooting in Aperture Priority mode, or just with photography in general, not every single photo needs to be shot at f2.8. Although the lens does go that low and the creamy blurry background in bokeh is super nice, I learned that shooting f4 or f5.6 with this camera, the image quality is literally so sharp it sometimes doesn't even look real. And with that, you know, more things are just in focus and the camera just snaps so fast. I would say recently I've been, you know, prioritizing this camera at f4 and f5.6 over f2.8 just because of how sharp the photos are. And with street photography, you can have more things in focus and the camera doesn't have to hunt as much as well. As for button customization on the back, two specific changes that I've made are the video button on the side that's used for video recording. I changed to the wireless photo transfer along with a crop mode. With the Ricoh GRiii being a 28mm camera, I was afraid that 28mm may be too wide, and I do find myself a lot of times going into 35mm and sometimes even 50mm. So rather than needing to have to go into the menu every single time and change that manually and go through a bunch of steps, every time I click the left button, it zooms in from 28mm to 35 and then from 35 to 50 once I click it again. And then when I click it a third time, it just returns and cycles back to 28mm. And I decided to use this left side button specifically because although this camera does have video capabilities, I wouldn't say they're very strong at all. And I honestly wouldn't recommend using the video capabilities out of this camera. It's really shaky, and I don't know, I feel like the resolution isn't that great. So that's why I use the left side video button. And then I also customized it where when you hold the left side video button down, then it turns on the wireless transfer onto our phone. So I'm able to quickly transfer the photos from the SD card on the Ricoh onto my iPhone within seconds. And to be able to do this, I just click the menu button on the back of the camera, and then I go down into the C or like customized settings, scroll down to the FN button settings, click right on the D-pad, and then when you scroll down, it says movie/wireless button, and I change that one to crop, and then click enter from there. And then on the next one where it says hold movie/wireless button, it goes into the wireless mode rather than recording. Those are all the settings that I used to make my shooting experience on the Ricoh GRiii 10 out of 10, and I would highly recommend if y'all liked any of these tips to implement it into your camera, and let me know what you think in the comments down below. Or if there's any settings that I missed that I should change, feel free to let me know down below in the comments as well to make my shooting experience easier, and I'll let y'all know how I do with that as well. So with that, thank you everyone for staying to the end, and happy shooting with your Ricoh GR3, and I'll catch y'all in the next video. Peace.